I was halfway through organizing mail on my kitchen counter when an envelope from Wildwood Estate dropped into my hands. It was a $100,000 wedding contract bearing my name and a signature I never signed. In that moment, I realized my own sister had used my credit to lock down the venue. Hi, I'm Ethan Reed, and this is how I discovered I wasn't a brother. I was a walking wallet. I was halfway through organizing the stack of unopened mail cluttering my kitchen counter when I noticed an envelope with a glossy gold-embossed return address. Wildwood Estate. The name alone exuded exclusivity, and for a moment I wondered if it was a mistake. I hadn't attended any weddings recently, much less planned one. Curiosity tugged at me. I slid a finger under the flap and pulled out a neatly folded document. The paper was thick, expensive. My eyes skimmed over the heading "Contract for Event Reservation." The words barely registered until I saw the line item just below. Total due $100,000. My breath caught in my throat. I blinked, hoping I'd misread. But there it was again, printed in elegant serif font right above a breakdown of services. Venue rental, premium floral arrangements, private catering, luxury transportation, 30 tables, champagne towers, imported orchids. And at the very bottom in dark blue ink, a signature. Mine. Except it wasn't. The handwriting mimicked mine well enough to fool a stranger. But the slant was too steep, the R in Reed curled the wrong way, and the loop in the E was too exaggerated. I stood there frozen, holding a contract I had never seen signed with a name that looked like mine but wasn't. Then I noticed the date. Last month. I had been in Seattle on a design consult when this contract had supposedly been signed. A slow burn crept into my chest. My fingers went cold. I stared at the name under bride in the header. Chloe Reed, my sister. The coffee mug I'd been reaching for slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. The sound rang out in the silence of the apartment, but I barely heard it. I couldn't take my eyes off the contract, Wildwood Estate. It was one of the most sought-after venues in upstate New York. I'd seen photos once during a project for a client who had attended a fundraiser there. Vaulted ceilings, crystal chandeliers, manicured gardens sprawling over 7 acres. People booked it 2 years in advance. It screamed money-privileged spectacle, and now it screamed betrayal. I picked up the contract again, scanning for a phone number. Found it in small print at the bottom. My hands trembled as I dialed. Wildwood Estate. How may I assist you? Hi, this is Ethan Reed. I received a contract in the mail today for a wedding reservation. I'm trying to understand what's going on. Oh, Mr. Reed. Yes, of course. We're thrilled to be hosting your sister's wedding. Everyone here is talking about your incredibly generous gift. My jaw clenched. My generous gift. Would you mind confirming the payment plan again? Certainly. We received the initial deposit of $25,000 last month via wire transfer. The second installment of $22,000 is due in 3 days. Would you like me to resend the invoice? No, thank you. That won't be necessary. I hung up before she could say anything else. I walked slowly to the window. The morning light filtered through the glass and caught the glossy edge of the contract still clutched in my hand. In the distance, the skyline of New York stretched against a pale blue sky, the city alive and uncaring. $100,000, a forged signature, and not a single phone call or text to ask for my consent. My phone buzzed. Chloe, just saw the ballroom today. You're the best brother ever. Another text followed almost immediately. Chloe, seriously, Ethan. You're making my dreams come true. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my banking app, scanned recent transactions. Nothing showed up for 25,000, but I noticed a new credit inquiry from a financial institution I didn't recognize. Wildwood Estate. A hard pull, a new line of credit under my name. I stood there for a long time, the city humming outside my window as the full weight of what had happened settled over me like a lead blanket. They had gone behind my back. They had used my name, my credit, my future, and they hadn't even bothered to ask. A third text arrived. Chloe Hope. It's okay, we're thinking of upgrading the floral package. It's just a little more for peonies, totally worth it. I set the phone down slowly, my chest ached. My own sister, the people I had always been told to protect. My phone buzzed again, a photo this time. Chloe in a champagne-colored dress posing in what I assumed was the bridal suite at Wildwood. A flute in her hand and a grin on her face. "You're the best," Ethan read the caption. My stomach turned. I had no words, only the sharp, nauseating realization that I was no longer a person in their eyes, just a wallet, and they'd already started spending. I walked into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. The apartment was quiet except for the low hum of the city filtering in through the double-paned windows. I reached over to the nightstand and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a black accordion folder thick with papers I hadn't looked at in years. I flipped through until I found what I was looking for. Family Debts Log. It was a spreadsheet I'd started a decade ago, more out of habit than intention. I hadn't even meant to keep it going, but somewhere between the first emergency plane ticket and the fourth surprise rent payment, it had become routine. I scanned the list. Chloe, auto repair, February 2015, $1,235. Chloe, tuition deposit, August 2016, $2,500. Chloe, Vegas trip overdraft, May 2017, $645. Chloe, phone replacement, October 2018, $980. Chloe, security deposit, July 2019, $2,000. Chloe, designer dress refund denied, March 2021, $1,350. Chloe, cosmetic dental work, January 2022, $4,700. Line after line spanning 10 years. I stopped tallying after the total passed 55 grand. The numbers weren't what hurt. It was the casual entitlement behind them. Not once had she paid me back. Not once had she asked if it was too much. And now she had forged my name on a 6-figure contract. My phone rang. Mom. I let it ring once, twice. Then I picked up and hit speaker. Hey, Ma. Ethan. I've been meaning to talk to you. Chloe told me you got the contract. Isn't Wildwood stunning? It is. I paused. So you knew about it? Of course. She's your sister. And what's family for if not to help each other? I leaned back against the headboard, staring at the ceiling. My jaw tightened. It would have been nice to be asked. Oh, don't be dramatic. You always said you wanted to do something special for her wedding, and she's been through so much lately. This is your chance to show you care. My chance to show I care. As if the last 10 years hadn't been enough. I heard rustling on her end, then her voice again, firmer now. Ethan, you're doing well. You live in the city, you have a great job, no kids, no mortgage. Meanwhile, Chloe has a million things on her plate. If you won't support her, who will? The words landed like bricks, Mom. I'm not a bank. There was a pause, then she sighed. You know your father and I are really disappointed in the way you're handling this. She's your sister. Family doesn't nickel and dime each other, especially not for something like a wedding. Something inside me shifted. I reached across the bed, grabbed the second phone I kept for work, and quietly opened the voice memo app. I pressed record. Ma, let me ask you something. If I didn't have good credit, if I wasn't doing well, would you or Dad have done this? You're missing the point, Ethan. It's not about money, it's about stepping up when it matters. It's about being a man. The call cut into a silence that felt heavier than anything she had said. I ended the recording. For a long moment, I just sat there staring at the waveform moving across the screen. That was the first time I had ever recorded a conversation with my mother. It felt wrong and necessary at the same time. My thumb hovered over the save button. I gave it a name. Call with Mom. Wedding contract, 9:17 a.m. I scrolled back to the top of the spreadsheet. I added a new line. Chloe, Wildwood Estate forged contract, June 2024, $100,000 pending. The number didn't feel real yet, but the weight of it did. I closed the folder and placed it back in the drawer, slower this time. Then I stood up and walked to the kitchen. The mug I had dropped earlier still lay in pieces on the floor. I knelt and picked up the largest shard, noticing a streak of old coffee still clinging to its edge. My reflection warped in its curve. I wasn't sure what I saw anymore. I dumped the pieces in the trash and wiped the floor clean. As I washed my hands, I stared out the kitchen window, watching a couple walk their dog below. The world kept moving, ordinary and undisturbed. But inside my chest, something was beginning to solidify. I had always justified their behavior. Told myself it was normal. Told myself I was doing what any good brother would do. But maybe I wasn't the problem. Maybe it was time I started documenting everything. Not because I wanted revenge, not yet, but because for once I needed to protect myself. I walked back into the bedroom, pulled out my laptop, and opened a new folder on the desktop. Family records. Inside, I created 3 subfolders: contracts, audio, financial. It was time to stop reacting and start preparing. This wasn't just a one-off mistake. This was a pattern, and I wasn't going to let them write the next chapter without me. The invitation had come 2 weeks ago in the form of a group text from my mother. Read anniversary, 40 years strong, Sunday at 3 p.m. Backyard BBQ, bring your best stories. It felt more like a command than a celebration. I almost didn't go. After the Wildwood contract, the phone call with my mother, and the recording sitting silently in my computer, I had every reason to stay away. But there was something about showing up, about facing it head on, that I couldn't walk away from. So I went. The backyard of my childhood home in Westchester was strung with white paper lanterns and folding chairs. The grill smoked steadily in the corner while classic rock played from a Bluetooth speaker someone had taped to the fence. My mother wore her favorite sky blue blouse, smiling as she moved from guest to guest with a glass of rosé. My father stood tall near the bar, one hand resting on the cooler, the other shaking hands with old friends. It all looked so normal, so curated. I walked in just as Chloe was posing for a photo with Aunt Margie. She wore a fitted pink dress and bright lipstick. Her laugh rang out across the lawn like she had nothing weighing on her at all. "Ethan, you made it," Diane called across the yard, walking toward me with her arms outstretched. She kissed my cheek quickly, then stepped back to scan my face. "You look tired. Work must be wearing you out," something like that. She led me over to a group of cousins near the grill. Most of them I hadn't seen in years. They asked the usual questions. "Still in the city, still doing architecture, any lucky ladies?" I answered politely, kept my tone light, my posture relaxed. Then Aunt Joan leaned in a little, nudging my arm. "We heard about the venue," she said. "That's really something. Chloe is over the moon. Must feel good doing something so big for your baby sister." My throat went dry. I smiled, nodded. "She deserves it, right?" Joan laughed, clearly mistaking my tight expression for modesty. They moved on to other topics, but I couldn't hear them anymore. My gaze drifted to Chloe across the yard, twirling a piece of her hair while showing off her ring to a group of wide-eyed teens. Lunch was served buffet style. Brisket, corn salad, potato chips. I sat at a long folding table next to Ryan, one of the few cousins I still vaguely trusted. We talked about baseball for a few minutes before he leaned in. Listen, man, I don't know what's really going on, but if something doesn't feel right, you're not crazy, just saying. I met his eyes and gave the smallest nod. Thanks. Before I could say more, Martin's voice boomed from the head of the table. Let's take a moment, everybody. 40 years with this amazing woman. I know I can be a tough guy, but she's stuck with me, and I'm grateful every damn day. The table clapped politely. Diane blushed. And we're even more excited. Martin continued to watch our little girl tie the knot. Chloe, sweetheart, you're gonna make a beautiful bride, and none of this would be possible without your big brother, Ethan. All heads turned toward me. To Ethan, he said loudly, lifting his beer. The most generous man I know. I froze. Cheers erupted. Cups clinked. Chloe winked at me from across the table like we shared some private joke. But I wasn't smiling. Martin looked around, confused by my silence. What's wrong, son? Not enough praise for you. I shook my head. No, it's just... You should be proud, he interrupted. Instead, you sit there looking like someone pissed in your cereal. Honestly, Ethan, sometimes I wonder if you even know what family means anymore. Everyone went quiet. That's enough, I said under my breath. No, you know what's enough, this attitude of yours. You're not a kid anymore. You're a man. Act like one. The words hit harder than I expected. I stood up slowly, feeling every eye on me. Excuse me, I said, pushing back from the table. I walked off the deck and down the lawn toward the back gate, past the garden beds I used to weed every summer. I found the old wooden bench near the hedge and sat down, hard elbows on my knees. My chest felt tight, like someone had pulled a string through my ribs and yanked. I stared at my hands open in my lap, remembering the way Martin used to hold them when I was 6 and scared of thunderstorms. The same man who just called me a disgrace in front of 20 people. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder. It was still running. I hadn't meant to start it before lunch, must have bumped it in my pocket, but it had caught everything. Martin's toast, his accusation, the silence that followed. I saved the file. Anniversary lunch. Martin, 3:47 p.m. I sat there for a while, letting the wind cool my face. My eyes stung, but I didn't wipe them. I let the tears gather and fall, not because I was weak, but because it hurt. It hurt to be expected to carry everyone else and still be told I wasn't enough. It hurt to be called ungrateful when all I had ever done was give. I wasn't ready to leave yet, but I was done being the one who kept the peace. The next morning I woke to a streak of sunlight cutting through the blinds and the dull ache of unresolved rage sitting heavy behind my eyes. I had barely slept. My dreams blurred with the sound of Martin's voice echoing over and over, calling me a man who didn't know what family meant. I made coffee but didn't drink it. Just stood there in the kitchen, arms crossed, watching the steam spiral up into nothing. My phone buzzed twice, then a third time. Group chat. Family. I didn't open it. Instead, I grabbed the black folder from the bedroom and laid it flat on the kitchen table. One by one, I removed the pieces I had begun collecting. The forged wedding contract, the list of payments I'd covered for Chloe over the years. The voice memos. It looked like a case file. In truth, that's exactly what it was. Why did they think they had the right? Why did my family believe that because I had no kids, no mortgage, no divorce to my name, that I owed them my entire life? I wasn't a man to them. I was a resource, a solution, a plan B. The thought kept cycling through me like a storm. Then another thought pushed through, quiet but insistent. What if this isn't just emotional? What if this is legal? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name. Noah Bennett. We had gone to college together at NYU. He became a civil litigator, sharp, relentless, always 2 steps ahead. We hadn't spoken in a while, but I knew he was the one I could trust. I hit call. Ethan Reed, he answered on the 3rd ring, voice warm, surprised. In a minute. Yeah, I know. Sorry to call out of the blue. Don't be. You sound tense. Everything all right? Not really. I need your legal brain for something. Off the record, maybe on the record later. You free this week, for you always. What's going on? I hesitated, then I told him. About the forged signature, the wedding venue, the contract in my name. About the payments, the hard credit pull. The total of $100,000 I never agreed to. By the end, there was a pause on his end. Jesus, Ethan, that's not just messed up, that's actionable. I sat down, finally feeling the weight of the folder in my hands. You think so? Yeah. Fraud, identity theft, maybe even coercion if we can prove they pressured the venue into it. At the very least, you can get your name off that contract and protect your credit. Did you sign anything? No. That's the thing. They forged it, but the venue thinks it's real. Do you have any proof? I've got the contract, my travel receipts showing I wasn't in the state when it was signed, and a recording of a call with the planner who confirmed my sister was behind it. That's a good start. Send me everything. I'll take a look tonight and we can talk tomorrow. My office is downtown, corner of 8th and Madison. You remember that bakery you liked near the park, Silverleaf? Exactly. Meet me there at 9 a.m. I'll bring coffee and contract printouts. Thanks, Noah. Seriously, Ethan, I'm glad you called. People like this get away with it too often because no one fights back. We hung up. For a few minutes, I just sat there at the table, the hum of the fridge the only sound in the apartment. Maybe this wouldn't fix the family. Maybe it would make everything worse. But for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than dread. I felt like I had a foothold, like I wasn't crazy. I opened my laptop and created a new folder on my desktop. Legal. Bennett. I dragged in the audio files, the scanned contract screenshots of Chloe's texts. I included the family debts log and a brief timeline of events. Then I saved a copy to a USB and slipped it into my jacket pocket. I packed my bag, grabbed a notepad, and wrote one word at the top. Boundaries. Then I crossed it out. Justice. That felt better. I zipped up and glanced out the window. Across the street, someone was walking their dog, a lab mix tugging against the leash. The owner smiled down, patient, unbothered by the resistance. I envied that kind of calm, because this fight hadn't even started yet. But now at least I wasn't walking into it alone. I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating against the nightstand over and over. When I picked it up, I saw 33 unread notifications. I blinked against the morning light streaming through the blinds and tapped into the first one. Tag from Aunt Cheryl. Then a screenshot sent by Ryan, no caption, just the image. It was a Facebook post. Diane Reed, 7:03 a.m. I raised my children to love and support one another, so I'll never understand how a grown man can stand by and watch his baby sister struggle with wedding costs without lifting a finger. What kind of brother does that? What kind of man? Below the post were over 100 likes and 52 comments. My chest tightened as I scrolled through them. Judy Clark, so sad, Diane. You deserve better. Paula Harrison, kids these days, no loyalty. Rick Warner. If that were my son, I'd disown him. Chloe Reed. Thank you for saying this, Mom. You've always been our rock. I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. The air in the room felt thicker, like it was closing in. I hadn't said a word to anyone about the legal steps I was taking. I hadn't posted a thing, not even a vague status. I'd kept it all quiet, all internal. And now I was being publicly crucified on a platform I hadn't used in months. I opened Instagram next. Chloe had shared a boomerang of her trying on veils captioned, "Blessed to have the best support system ever." The comment section was filled with hearts, cheers, congratulations. There was no space for truth, no room for the other side. I locked the phone and got up, pacing the kitchen floor in slow circles. The knot in my stomach pulled tighter with every step. I felt exposed, judged by people who didn't know the full story, who had only heard one carefully curated version. But even worse than the judgment was the silence of people who did know me. People who could have messaged, asked, clarified, and didn't. I poured a glass of water, took one sip, then poured it out again. My hands itched to type, to reply, to post screenshots, to upload voice memos, to defend myself in front of this digital jury. But I didn't. Instead, I opened a blank notepad on the kitchen counter and wrote 2 words in block letters. No reaction. I underlined them twice. I wasn't going to fight a war in comment sections. I wasn't going to waste energy convincing people who had already decided I was the villain in a story they didn't understand. I picked up my phone again and texted Noah. Me. Just saw the Facebook stuff. No clue how deep this is gonna get. Still meeting you at 9. He responded almost instantly. Noah already at Silverleaf. Bring all the screenshots too. The more evidence of pressure or defamation, the better. I dressed quickly, slipped the USB drive into my pocket, grabbed the folder from the kitchen table and headed for the door. As I locked it behind me, I paused. The hallway was quiet, the elevator humming somewhere above. I took a breath and told myself again what I had already decided. This wouldn't be solved online. This wouldn't be solved with posts or threads about posts. This would be solved with facts, with proof, with action. Let them talk. Let them post. I was done reacting. I was done defending. From now on, I was building a case. After the meeting with Noah, I walked 4 blocks before stopping on a bench outside a corner bookstore. The folder in my hand felt heavier than it should have. Noah had confirmed what I already suspected. I had a strong case, but to solidify it, I needed one more piece, a direct link between Chloe and the forged contract. I opened my phone and scrolled until I found the number for Isabel Cruz. She was the wedding planner listed on the Wildwood estate paperwork. I remembered her name from the documents and the brief email trail where she had confirmed my supposed approval. I had never spoken to her. I pressed call and waited. Isabel picked up on the 3rd ring, her voice upbeat. "Hi, this is Isabel Cruz from Events by Bloom. Who am I speaking with?" "Hi, Isabel, this is Ethan Reed. I believe we're connected through the Wildwood estate wedding." "Oh." "Ethan." Yes, of course." Her tone shifted slightly tighter now. I slid my phone into speaker mode and tapped the voice memo app on my other phone, starting the recording. "Thanks for taking the call. I just had a few questions I was hoping you could clarify. I noticed the venue contract was signed under my name, but I don't recall signing anything. In fact, I never approved it. Can you tell me who initiated the booking?" There was a pause. "Well, technically the bride's party reached out. Chloe. She said her brother, you would be handling the financials. She provided your name and details. I assumed it was all discussed with you beforehand. Did she ever send a signed document from me?" "She sent a PDF. It had your signature. It looked legit. I honestly had no reason to doubt it." "I'm so sorry if there's been a misunderstanding. Was there ever a phone call where I confirmed no? It was all via email and text. She did mention you were busy with work and asked me not to bother you directly unless it was urgent. I nodded slowly, even though she couldn't see me. One more question, Isabel. Did she say why she needed to use my name? She said it was because your credit was better, that it would help secure the venue faster. It's not uncommon in family bookings, so I didn't think to push back. Thank you for being honest. That's all I needed to hear. Isabel sounded nervous. Is everything okay? I'm working on making it okay. That's why I called. I ended the call and stared at the waveform still recording on my screen. I let it roll another few seconds before hitting stop. Audio. Isabel Cruz. 11:42 a.m. My hands trembled slightly as I saved the file. There it was, the admission. Chloe had used my name knowingly and Isabel had accepted it without verification. It wasn't just a miscommunication. It was coordinated. A few days ago, that kind of betrayal might have shattered me, but now all it did was clarify my purpose. I leaned back on the bench and looked up at the sky. A few leaves drifted down from the tree overhead. The city bustled around me, indifferent to the small chaos unraveling in my life. This wasn't about just one wedding or one forged signature anymore. It was about the years of assumption, entitlement, manipulation, the weight I had carried so quietly for so long. And for the first time, I had something concrete, a voice, a truth, a file that no one could deny. I collected everything and laid it across the dining room table the same way a surgeon lays out instruments. The family debts log, the forged contract, the emails, the texts from Chloe and Diane, the call recordings with my mother and with Isabel. All of it organized in neat stacks labeled contracts, financial, messages, audio. I took a deep breath and let my fingers hover over the pile, gravity settling in unison with every breath. Then I heard my phone buzz, a text from Jason Liu, the creative director at Skyline Design in Austin. He'd called yesterday, invited me to consider joining their team as design director. It came just as I could feel my world splintering. I typed back, realizing how badly I needed out. He responded immediately. Packages details tomorrow midday. Let me know if you want to move fast. I set the phone down and exhaled. My apartment felt smaller. The walls seemed to press in. Every article of evidence on the table whispered at me to stay and fight. Every part of me whispered that staying was exactly what they wanted. I thought back to the nights I had barely slept, always balancing family debt on one shoulder and guilt on the other. My thumb hovered over the folder marked contracts, but I understood something then. It wasn't just about evidence. It was about reclaiming myself. I slid the first stack into a sleek manila folder, then pressed it into a drawer. I did the same with the emails and audio files. When I closed it, I felt lighter, as though I'd let go of something I didn't even know weighed me down. Across the table, I saw my leather portfolio with the Skyline Design logo faint, but still visible. I picked it up and unzipped it slowly. Inside were printed mock-ups showcasing the design ethos that had earned me that offer. The rage and betrayal and plans for revenge felt closer now, but so did the possibility of creation instead. I pulled out a folder labeled Offer Letter, Skyline Design. I laid it next to the evidence pile. Two different futures sprawled side by side. One tangled with my past in a web of resentment, the other uncluttered and streamlined, waiting for me to choose it. I looked out the window into the quiet street where morning had given way to noon. The mailman walked past carrying a package. The world outside carried on without interruption. My life at that moment hinged on a decision to be written in footsteps rather than signatures. I picked up the offer letter and tore the seal. Inside the crisp navy texture was an offer design director at $120,000 annually plus relocation assistance, and a clear path to lead a creative team of 3. It felt like a life raft after sinking for too long. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window. My reflection showed a man shaped by obligation and sacrifices. But I could be someone else now, someone who isn't defined by what others expect but by what I choose for myself. My phone lit up with another message, Aunt Cheryl asking if I'd seen Mom's post. I put it face down on the table. The fight on screen would go on without me. I stood and moved to the folder again. I tucked everything inside, closed it, and slid it into my backpack. If I didn't leave now, I would lose myself, and I knew that truth with the weight of certainty. I picked up my keys, took one last look around the room, and walked out the door with purpose in my stride and the first breath of freedom in my gut. I parked outside a cafe a few blocks from my apartment. The downtown morning light shifted across the table as I opened my laptop and found the folder marked Legal Bennett. I clicked through the audio file of Isabel's confession and the scanned contract, then composed an email to Wildwood Estate. Every word felt heavy with consequence. Good morning. I am Ethan Reed. I recently received a wedding contract from your venue signed under my name without my knowledge or consent. The signature is forged. I did not approve or sign this agreement. I am requesting immediate cancellation of this contract and removal of my name as a guarantor. Please confirm receipt. I hit send and watched the cursor blink a moment longer than I liked. Then I closed the laptop and folded my hands in my lap, mind racing while the cafe buzzed around me, oblivious. An hour later, my inbox pinged. I clicked into a reply from a venue coordinator at Wildwood Estate. They confirmed they had received my email. Since the contract lacks a valid signature, they will consider the agreement void. They inform me that unless a valid signature is provided within 5 business days, they will cancel the reservation and refund the deposit to whoever originally paid it. They also noted that the person listed as signer would still be financially responsible if no replacement is provided. I exhaled, running a hand over my face. The words filled me with something I hadn't felt in weeks: vindication. Karma, maybe. On my screen, the evidence files felt lighter. The forged signature, the debts, the recordings, the timeline, all of it was beginning to have an effect. Outside the cafe, the city kept moving. A barista called for the next order. Pedestrians crossed the street unaware. It occurred to me that some battles were won not with anger or drama, but with clean precision. I closed the email, printed a copy of the venue's response, and slipped it into my folder. My phone buzzed, another text from Jason confirming next week's offer details. I didn't respond immediately. I just held the confirmation and the venue response together in my hand and tilted them like scales. On one side was my freedom, on the other the twisted version of family expectations. I slipped the printed reply into the folder labeled Evidence and moved everything into my backpack. I stood and met my reflection in the cafe window. I no longer looked winded or broken. I looked steady, real. Karma was starting to matter. I walked out into the daylight, folder in hand, and felt the first clear sense of forward motion in what felt like an eternity. The responses started trickling in before I even hit send on Noah's texts. My phone vibrated relentlessly, and when I scanned the screen, the tightening in my chest turned to something much heavier. Chloe had forwarded the venue's response to the family group chat. The thread exploded. I watched as messages piled up. Aunt Cheryl declared that I had ruined Chloe's dream wedding. Cousins chimed in saying how grateful they were for family who supported each other, though mine apparently did not. More jabs, more assumptions, more confirmation that I was the villain in their script. Then Ben, my cousin on my mother's side, who rarely posted anything online, slid into my DMs. I tapped his name hand steady for once. "You're doing the right thing even if no one else sees it." I read those words again. Maybe from anyone else they would have felt like backhanded comfort. But when they came from Ben, I felt something right in the center of my gut. He wasn't defending me in public. He was doing better than that. He was seeing the truth. A quick response. "Thanks, man. Means a lot." Later that evening, I tried to keep working, drafting a summary of the timeline for Noah. Chloe's growing hysteria echoed in my phone as he called again. "They told me today they don't have my signature. Chloe is blaming me for lost deposits." "What am I supposed to do?" Her voice cracked when she spoke into the phone. She was starting to cry. I didn't respond. I didn't say that I knew she had done this without a second thought, that I had everything from the spreadsheet to the recordings stacked against her. Then my phone rang. I pressed accept. "Ethan, it's your father." His voice sounded different, quiet, less polished than the public Martin I'd grown up with. We hadn't spoken in days. "Dad, I'm busy." "No, listen, I made a mistake. I pushed this too far. Chloe's scared. Our family, your mother is upset. You've taken us by surprise and I don't understand." I leaned back and folded my arms, listening to the weight of his words. He wasn't bragging or praising me. He sounded unmoored. "I'm not doing this for blame. I'm not trying to shame anyone." Then he said something that stopped me. "If fighting means I can be proud of my son again, then fight. I want that. I want to see it." I paused and stared at the phone. For so long he had given me every piece of instruction I needed to be a good man, and I followed most of them. Except this one. Standing up for myself felt revolutionary. I wasn't sure what came over me when I said it, but I said, "I will, Dad. I will." I hung up and let the silence fill the space between our calls. I looked at the packed group chat again, then switched off my notifications. I didn't want their judgment anymore, but I also didn't want to disappear. Because karma wasn't about public shaming. It was about truth going where it needed to go, even without a crowd. I shut my laptop. In closing time, I stood and looked out the window of my apartment toward the city skyline. Lights in office buildings flickered on. Tomorrow was another day. A day where I wouldn't be carried by guilt, but propelled by something just. And that was the first time in a long while I felt steady enough to hold on to. I closed my laptop, packed the folder, and slipped the key into my pocket before heading to the airport. The flight to Austin wasn't long, but it felt like crossing into a different life. When I landed, the dry Texas heat hit me like a welcome slap, warm and real. I hailed a ride to the apartment I'd leased sight unseen, just minutes from Skyline Design's offices. When I turned the key in the lock, the silence felt different, earned, not empty. Most of the movers had already unloaded the boxes and ran. Sunshine Street, where I was staying, was quiet in the afternoon haze, the kind of quiet that made you aware of your own heartbeat. I leaned against the doorframe and let the stillness settle over me, savoring the break between past and what was coming. Inside, the apartment smelled of fresh primer and new carpets. I dragged the boxes inside, nose filling with paint and promise. I started with the basics. I opened a large box labeled Kitchen Essentials and found the coffee maker I'd brought from New York. I set it on the counter and swear I could taste the difference. Then I lined up a couple of framed photos, nothing sentimental, just abstracts with Texas sunsets I'd printed at FedEx. Later, when the moving guys brought in my desk and the samples of fabric and trim from Skyline's showroom, I set them up in my makeshift studio area. I arranged the swatches by color, then patterns, then textures. Pens, notebooks, my laptop charger. Everything I needed to start feeling like myself again. I took a step back and looked at my reflection in the glass of a floor-to-ceiling window, a silhouette framed by dust motes floating in slanting light. In that reflection, I saw someone steady and composed, but also lighter somehow. I straightened the collar of my shirt and narrowed my shoulders, not in defense, but in readiness. That afternoon, I walked to Jefferson Park, a few blocks from the office. The live oaks stood in dappled shade. Kids were playing dogs, running after frisbees. I stretched my arms, inhaled, let the Texas breeze fill my lungs. At that moment, I realized something simple but profound. I felt free. Back in the apartment, I set up my desk by the window. In the soft glow of the setting sun, I placed the technical drawing board, a pencil cup, and a few mood board samples I'd already started assembling for my first project at Skyline Design. I turned in my chair and gazed out at the city skyline, a silhouette of cranes and rooftops and early evening lights. I tapped the glass as though testing it and saw that I wasn't the same person who walked out wearing guilt and evidence. I was different now. I was intentional. I was beginning. No phone buzzed with demands, no invitations to drama, just me and a sketch and an idea rising that was entirely mine. The reflection in the window stayed steady through dusk and into soft night. And I realized for the first time in as long as I could remember, I liked who I saw. I picked up a pen and started sketching a structure of lines and curves. The city behind me, soft and familiar, felt like the first page of my next chapter. I set the pen down and stared at my sketch, the still curving lines marking possibilities ahead. My phone buzzed against the desk. I picked it up and saw Chloe's name on the screen. My heart jolted and I swallowed the knot in my throat before hitting answer. Her voice was tentative, and when she finally spoke, it sounded small. "I'm sorry, Ethan." The words were soft but loaded. I closed my eyes and breathed in slowly. I pictured the folder I had packed earlier, the evidence, the recordings, the timeline, everything I'd collected to protect myself and reclaim my life. Then I opened my eyes. "I'm sorry" was enough. I said, evenly firm, but not cruel. Silence. Then she whispered, "I know I was wrong. I never meant for things to spiral this far." I realized how hollow sympathy sounded when unearned, but something stronger held me steady. "I'm letting it go," I said, "but don't ask for a second chance." I didn't give her time to speak. I ended the call and put the phone down with deliberate calm. The design board blurred a bit as I cleared the rush of thoughts. I felt no triumph, only that quiet, strong pulse of self-respect returning. I walked to the window and watched the last light of day soften the glass. Forgiveness didn't mean inviting her back. Instead, it meant not letting her pull me back into what used to be. I glanced at the framed sketch behind me. It felt symbolic now, not just a design, but a declaration. I felt ready. For the first time, I knew forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant choosing my own path. The sun had set behind the skyline, but the city lights still glowed through the window, warm and unjudging. I sat at my desk, hands resting on the sketch I had left unfinished, and let the arc of everything I'd lived settle inside me. I started to speak, not into a microphone or an audience, but in my own quiet voice, as if telling my history to a friend. I was always the good one in the family, the responsible son, the supportive brother, the calm in the chaos. And I let it define me for years. I bared my heart, my wallet, my time. I ignored the debt, the expectations, the silent demands. I swallowed guilt for things that weren't mine to carry. And then they crossed a line, forging my signature on a $100,000 wedding contract, framing me as ungrateful when I refused to bail them out again. I was the villain in the narrative they created. I lost sleep, I questioned myself, and for a moment I thought maybe they were right. But I realized something. Saying no doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you whole. I found proof. I gathered documents, recordings, the ledger of loans made in love and expectation, and I turned it into truth. I approached the venue. They sided with fact, not family pressure. Karma wasn't flashy, but it arrived. Quiet, persistent, just. I left. I went to Austin. Started again. I set my own rules. I built spaces out of beauty and intention, not obligation. I held my head higher, knowing that a life isn't stolen when you claim it back. I forgave, not because I let the past go without consequences, but because I freed myself from carrying it in my bones. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing your own path. I was never ungrateful. I simply refused to keep being a walking wallet. If you have ever found the courage to say no when no was painted as weakness, you aren't alone. And if that word changed your life, I'd love to hear from you. For the first time in years, I felt exactly where I belonged.